Tim, would you want to open with a word of prayer for us?
Yes. God, your word is a living, breathing word that's sharper than any double-edged sword. It's the discerner of the heart. So, Father, speak to us tonight as we are studying your word and we're interested in hearing from you. Because, Lord, we're eager to be in your will and to know how to act and how to be in this current situation in our nation, Lord. And we're thinking of children and adults who desperately need to hear from you. So help us in the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. So tonight we're on Nehemiah chapter 2. And if you remember from last chapter, Nehemiah is he's back in Babylon. He happens to be the wine taster or server to King Artaxerxes, king of Babylon. And people have come from Jerusalem, and he's wanted to know how things are in Jerusalem, so they tell him how terrible it is there. Yes, they've been working on rebuilding the temple, but the walls of the city are in ruins. There's no gates. There's no protection. All kinds of terrible things happen because there is no secure border, basically, for this great city of Jerusalem that's now in ruins. So people come and go, and the people that want to do bad things are able to come and go. You're going to see a little bit of this now, okay? So let's jump in. Nehemiah chapter 2, and verses 1 through 5, I called those a perceptive king. Verse 1. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" And the king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." First set of discussion questions are on the back side there in number 1. If you are the servant of a king or another powerful, important person, how attentive do you need to be to their needs? Very.
Your life depends on it.
Yeah, especially in the case of a king, your life depends on it. You displease the king, whoosh, off with your head, right? So you want to be very, very attentive to the needs of the king and the moods of the king, right? And if they're in a bad mood, you know, to tiptoe around and do things to suit whatever. You need to be very attentive. Now, what stands out about King Artaxerxes here in verse 2? What seems to be different about him?
He knows that much about Nehemiah. He's pretty close. Got a pretty close bond.
He knows how to read Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah's there to take care of the king's needs, but what's the king paying attention to? Nehemiah's emotional and well-being and his mentality, and he can see something is wrong. So that's why I called this the attentive king. In verse 3, why would you think Nehemiah was very much afraid when he answered the king?
He had power and authority, and whatever way he decided, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And there's some other dynamics there too.
He might have thought that the king would think he was whining and be like, "I can't be bothered with you. Off with your head."
Yeah, you're done. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In other words, wait a minute. You're here to take care of my needs, and you're moping around and acting like I'm supposed to do something for you, right? So it's like, here we go, you know. And Nehemiah said he prayed, right, before he answered the king. Now, how do the king and his servant Nehemiah, how do they change roles in verse 4? What does the king ask him?
What's he?
Yeah. What do you want me to do? Do you see how the roles just flipped? It was Nehemiah's job to always ask the king, my Lord, what do you want me to do for you? And it was always the king's job to go, you do this, this, and this. Things just flipped. Do you realize that? Only God can do that. Okay? So they switched roles. The king is now the servant, and the servant is now the one directing things about king, what do I want? Oh, let me tell you what I want. So what does Nehemiah do first, and what does he request of the king? First he prays, and then he asks.
Well, then he praised the king.
He stroked the king too. May the king live forever.
That's a great start.
And if I have pleased you, and by the way, Nehemiah was a very pleasing servant. He worked hard to please the king. But then he asked the king, will you let me go back and do what? Rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So just to wrap up this paragraph, who is your king? Who's our king? Jesus. And how did Jesus reverse roles with us? He died for our sins. He came to serve. In fact, Jesus said the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. So you see, even our king did the same thing that we just saw happen between Artaxerxes and Nehemiah. The king and the servant reversed roles, and our king served us and gave himself for us. Okay. What kinds of things do you ask of your king? Typically. We ask for everything, yeah.
Because you don't ask.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, stop and think about that. Our King of Kings and Lord of Lords says you have not because you ask not. Wow. So what do we typically ask Jesus for? How about you? But my first answer is forgiveness. You know? Healing? Yeah, okay. We ask him to intercede for healing and wellness for other people. Yeah? Okay. So we ask for spiritual insight for people, that they'll come to him. What's that? Okay, we ask him for protection. I know I've told you before, I always ask the Lord, if this car's going to break down on this trip, please, Lord, let it do it in the first hour before I get too far from home. What'd you say, Tim? Blessings. Yeah, we look for his blessing. For instance, I don't know about you, but like when you put in a garden, does anybody pray over your garden? Because I got to tell you, just because I put the seed in the ground doesn't mean it's going to sprout. Not the way I garden, you know. Sometimes we ask the Lord's blessings on our animals when we're doctoring a cow in the barn or a calf, you know, to bring it through.
Healing.
Yep, healing. One of the things Terry and I habitually will ask for is we ask the Lord to convict us of our sin, right? Because you know your pastor, I'm never going to stop sinning. I mean, in the sense, I'm not a perfect man, you know what I mean? So it's like, Lord, keep me convicted of it. So I keep bringing it to him when I do. And then we ask the Lord to help us to be sensitive to his Spirit's leading so he hears what he wants to say. And then show us what you want us to do. You know what? You know, and then we ask for that for our kids. We want our kids to be convicted. We do. Yeah.
Protection against the enemy and his schemes.
Okay, for protection against the enemy. Yep. I ask my king to tear down my enemies. I do. Yeah.
I just want to bounce them.
Yeah. And I want them to be torn down. Tim's got it. How hard? So when they hit the ground, what happens? They bounce. I want to see them bounce. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we pray that we can see the truth. How many of us are confused in these times we live in about what's true and what's not? I mean, for instance, we've mentioned many times that there's some prophetic preachers that Terry and I listen to, and yet so somebody sent us something this past week, and it was a prophet, supposedly, whatever, but going after the other ones about how they're lying and stuff, and I'm thinking, oh boy, here's confusion. See what I'm saying? And now there are people who, by the way, never put all your hope in an individual, but there's a lot of people who put a hope that Donald Trump is still in control behind the scenes. And it's like, oh, come on. But point being, so in light of those people, we heard somebody saying Donald Trump is part of the World Economic Forum and he's working to bring America down. Do you see it's lies, it's misinformation, disinformation. We don't know what the truth is today. So God help us to sort it out.
That's really, I often find myself asking for discernment because there's so many conflicting voices
Yeah.
and opinions and ideas and thoughts. When people start telling me I feel or I think, then I get nervous.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have feelings and thoughts, but I would never share them with most people.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Hey, and I got to tell you, when I when I worked in county government, people would ask me a question or whatever, and sometimes, and I would say, part of my paycheck is for the things I say, and part of my paycheck comes from what I will not say. I'm not going there. You don't really want to know what I'm thinking. All right. So anyway, just be aware of that. Just as Artaxerxes and Nehemiah switched, and the servant became the king, and the king became the servant, Jesus took our place, and lets us ask him, what do you want me to do for you? He really is a servant king. All right, second paragraph now, verses 6 through 10. I called it the gracious hand of God. So starting with verse 6, then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, how long will your journey take, and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, now he's piling on, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence that I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests, plural. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king also sent army officers and cavalry with me. When Nehemiah rolls into town, everybody paid attention. It's like, whoa,
Something's going on.
yeah, he's riding with the king, even though the king stayed back in Babylon. All right. Now, verse 10. And we're going to see these characters throughout Nehemiah. So they're trouble. All right. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Somebody's going to take up the cause of the people of God. All right, second set of questions. Can you think of a time when you asked for something and got a whole lot more than you initially wished for?
Every time.
Okay. All right.
Got a good track record.
Okay. All right.
When I asked Jesus for forgiveness
Okay.
and inclusion in the kingdom's family,
Yeah.
I got so much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every day, every single day, every breath, every heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't just get forgiveness.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Blessing after blessing.
Yeah.
Still getting them.
Yep. Yep. Our cup overflows in so many different areas of our lives, doesn't it? Yeah. And Tim, you said you got a truck. You asked for a truck, right? It worked.
Yeah.
And what'd the boss give you?
Brand new one.
You got a brand new semi truck. And not only that, but Tim told his boss he was thinking about leaving. Tim, what'd you get?
More money.
More benefits. Okay. By the way, is Tim serving his master well? Absolutely. And so in the end, who became the king? What? King Tim.
Things are going to change tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Can you think of a time when you asked for something and got a whole lot more than you asked
I
for?
was thinking something even more than that. Like sometimes, circumstance happens. And it seems like like stuff will break around the house, and it'll be this, and then you get in the car, and the lights on in the car, and it'll just pile on. It gets pretty overbearing.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you almost think I look back to when we were having problems with Rebecca, like, boy, you don't even think you're going to make it through.
Yeah.
And then when he does, all of a sudden he starts checking things off, and you're not doing anything. And I think that's the whole thing. You're not doing anything, and they're just getting checked off. And you just kind of have to step back and smile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there's a couple things you're focused on. Boy, if I could just get through these, boy, things would level out. And not only do they go, but then this goes, and then that goes, and that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, you almost feel guilty for too many blessings. You know? Can we save this for next time?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like it seems like sometimes all the obstacles just fall and you're not even doing anything. You
Yeah.
know what I mean, you fret and you worry, which we're not supposed to, but we do.
Sure.
You fret and worry and you can't sleep at night, you know, and you pray 40 times in the middle of the night and boy, you just can't get around this obstacle. And when it goes, I mean, like all the dominoes start falling.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you're just standing back there in awe, you know, just got a smile this big on your face, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like, man, watch my God go.
All right. So there are times we ask the Lord for something and we get more than we ask for. All right. So there's two great examples right there. Now in verse 6, what does the king ask Nehemiah that indicates he's seriously considering the request? When are you leaving? When are you coming back? So by the way, is King Artaxerxes setting Nehemiah free?
Wow.
No, you're coming back to my service, but when are you leaving and when are you coming back? So he wasn't releasing him from his service, but if Nehemiah wants to go do this, he was going to free him to go do that, but he wanted him back. All right, so Nehemiah was a valuable servant to him. So then, what more does Nehemiah dare to ask for in verse 7? Give me these letters. I want a letter to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates. By the way, the Trans-Euphrates is that whole region. You got to understand, Babylon's over here. You got to get up through Syria and Assyria before you head south down into the Fertile Crescent where Israel is. And then the northern Israel is known as Samaria. That the whole thing is the Trans-Euphrates region, it was called. And then you had to get down to the southern part before you got to the land of Judah and where Jerusalem was. So Nehemiah had to go through a lot of territory, so he wanted the governors of Trans-Euphrates, hey, will you give me letters so they'll just let me pass through without harassment? Because who's Nehemiah? He's a Jew, all right? And they have been defeated. They have been conquered. And so if there's anybody that had a big target for being picked on and abused, who was it? It was them, yeah, all right? So anyway, he asked them for a letter for protection. And then, and when I get there, could you give me another letter to give to the governor in that Judah area? The one who, it's called the park, but basically natural resources. Nobody could cut a tree unless it was going to be in the king's service. Could I get a letter so I could get the timbers to rebuild the gates and all this stuff? Okay. And then, just like the cherry on top, what does King Artaxerxes throw in?
Military escort.
Let me give you your military escort. Nobody's going to screw with you, Nehemiah. Okay? So it was just really cool. All right. Why are Sanballat and Tobiah disturbed when Nehemiah gets there?
I'm thinking he probably thought they were rid of the Jews.
Yep.
Jerusalem was in rubble.
Yep.
And, they had dealt with them before.
Yeah.
And they saw what God was doing for the Jews before this.
With the rebuilding of the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because these are two characters from Ezra, by the way. All right. Yeah. And Nehemiah is there with some degree of power and authority, and they're not quite sure what it is, but Nehemiah gets busy on something. We're going to find out in a minute more. But Nehemiah was clearly there to benefit the Jews.
Yeah.
Now, stop and think about this. If you've got a group of people that it's open season on, they have no power, they've been conquered, and then you've got Sanballat and Tobiah who have some governmental authority granted to them by the king of Babylon, but they're like little officials. Like, you ever notice some people, when they become a little government official, they turn into little tyrants? That's who you're looking at when you look at Sanballat and Tobiah. And if they're disgusted that somebody is here to look out for the Jews, for their welfare, for their benefit, what does that tell you? that Sanballat and Tobiah have been doing.
They're anti-Semitics.
Yeah, they don't like them. They've probably been abusing them. They've probably been taking advantage in some way, right? I mean, after all, why do you want to have gates and walls around your city? Why do you want to have good, solid doors that lock on your house at night? Why do we want a good, strong southern border? It's to control who comes and goes, because if you don't, people will do whatever they want, whenever they want to you. That's Sanballat and Tobiah right there.
We should ask President Biden why he had $500,000 wall put around his beach facility.
Yeah.
Why you need
Take a look at verse 8. At verse 8, I put it in bold print. What does Jeremiah see at work in the king's actions?
Most High.
The hand of my God, the gracious hand of the Lord God was with me, right? So looking back, can you see God's hand at work in events in your life? If you look back, okay, yeah. We can just say, only God could have done this, right?
Sometimes he does things and, like, there was this promotion I wanted once and I should have got it because I was the most qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get it, and because of a bunch of stuff that was being said that wasn't true about me and stuff. And I remember crying and going home and asking the Lord, why? Why didn't I get that? That should have been mine. And I was all fired up and everything. And God knows I get like that sometimes, and he still shows me grace. And then the guy who got it, he got fired from his job. And I got a promotion and went up to Rochester. We lived in Rochester for 9 years. And I just went through the ranks like crazy because up there was where all the knowledge was, and he was left down there. And then eventually I got that position. And then I oversaw 4 more of their hotels on top of it. So it's sometimes we don't always see the answer right there.
Yeah.
But God does things for a reason, and then he will grant it. I mean, he's not in a watching the clock in a time like we are. He's in a different time zone altogether. It's God's time. So,
Yeah, that's a great testimony right there. We can look back at times and see where it was God's hand, even though we might not have realized it at the time. But then when you look back, it's like, oh, wow, thanks, God, Like, who would have known when I went to a gas station on a particular afternoon, I would run into an old parishioner who was one of Terry's best friends who set up a blind date for us. I mean, that's how it came to be.
I thought you were going to say when they did away with your position.
That too, yeah.
At DSS, I had been after him because of the horrible treatment, just backstabbing people. And I used to say to him, Dave, you need to look for something else. You need to look for something else. But, it was a job that paid well. So anyways, long story short, when they did away with his position, you just think, oh my gosh, this is awful. And I remember saying at the time, well, maybe this is God's way of saying, if you won't leave and look, I'm going to help you. And of course, it was easier for me to say because I was the one losing my job. But I mean, we couldn't have imagined the events that,
right.
and it's the lifestyle that is just much more peaceful for us. And it's just been wonderful. But did we see it back then? No.
Yeah. So we can all think of times where it was the hand of God, right? And how do I say this? Nehemiah didn't take the position that, I served the king so good. Look what he finally did for me. He saw the hand of God in it, even in the attitude of the king, right? So hold on to that. God's hand is at work in each of our lives. All right, our second paragraph, or third paragraph, verses 11 through 16, I called it Nehemiah reconnoiters by night. So stop and think. If you're going to plan a building project, when would you go inspect things?
In the day, we see.
Oh, reconnoiter? It's a reconnaissance mission. In other words, you're going to go look things over, get the lay of the land, figure out what the situation is. For instance, when we take a look at projects, building projects around the church, we do it in the daylight. He goes and does it at night. Let's explore that, okay? So starting with verse 11, Nehemiah writes, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me, no horses, except the one I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate. By the way, you don't want to live near the dung gate. That's literally the refuse garbage dung gate. All right.
That's where you empty your chamber pot.
Yeah, it's the dump. All right. So I went out the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem which had been broken down, and its gates which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. I'm going to gather probably because it was full of rubble. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or the officials or any others who would be doing the work. All right. I just thought of one observation real quick. He said nothing to anybody about all these people in charge, the power structure, and he didn't say anything to anybody doing the work. Because I'm just thinking about a supervisor now. If you tell people what you are of a mind to do before you have a plan, before you've examined the details and everything else, what is the first thing the people who are going to do the work do?
Oh, that ain't gonna work.
Shoot it down. We can't do. No way. Right? Yeah, and resistance. So Nehemiah, he's a wise man. All right. So let's look at the third set of questions. First of all, what kind of problems have you and I had to put a lot of time in to consider how to tackle them? What kinds of problems do we really need to, we need to really put some time into thinking how to tackle certain problems?
Facing the Board of Education.
Okay, facing the Board of Education. Okay. Yeah, that's going to take some tactician thought.
When I went through my divorce.
Okay, when we go through a divorce, that takes a lot of time. How to present your case, what's coming at you. Also, how do you restructure your life? Because we have to restructure finances, right? I mean, it's hard. How we're going to just get along. Yeah, okay. Other problems, you really have to think about how we're going to tackle them. Anybody think of any others?
We thought about how we were going to retire.
Okay, how to retire.
Financially set, could we make it, could we not?
Sure.
You know, could we retire early, could we not? So,
Yeah, yep. A lot of financial planning, and that has to do with our paying off debt, how much money we're going to have, and lots of considerations. Yeah. Jan.
Making out wills.
Okay, making out wills, especially when you got multiple children to leave things to, right? That's why if our kids were listening, we've changed our will 16 times because first we like one and then we like the other. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, okay, sure. Considering how to dispose of things, so that it'll go to the person that'll appreciate them the most. Yeah.
Before we made plans as far as concerns about inheritance or whatever, we talked to our family, our children,
Okay.
and because the options were numerous, my goal was to leave it to the kids in a trust, and there was some real reasons, advantages to that. No capital gains tax. For me, very fortunate. They lived there for 15 years already, so you have to be vested for 5 years before there's no capital gains tax. So
Okay.
we beat that before we even decided. And so there was a whole lot of thought that went into that. We had all kinds of questions for the lawyer
Yeah.
who gave it to us, and now even now, some people think I was nuts, but it's a revocable trust if something were to go completely bizarrely haywire. We could always, as trustors, say no, we're going to cancel the deal. But that was not why we agreed to it. We're not going to. But most people don't realize that you can lose a great portion of your inheritance if you don't have it planned ahead of time and you don't do what's right. What are the loopholes? What are the legalities?
Yeah.
So your kids can end up with maybe half of what you had
Yeah.
once the thing is settled.
Yeah. And it's important to discuss those things, and like Tim used the word loopholes. That has a bad connotation, but it's not, because the only reason loopholes exist is so the people who make the rules can leave all their stuff to their kids, but if you don't know about them, they can get half of your stuff.
Exactly.
That's what they're up to.
I told
Really
my
is.
kids I was just gonna spend all my money so they wouldn't have to worry about it.
That's right. No, you won't have to fight about it. Yeah, I love the bumper sticker. We're spending our kids' inheritance.
Yeah.
Ha 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 ha. Okay. So there's a lot of things in life we have to really carefully consider, don't we? All right. I know Terry and I, it's an evolving process, but about how to, start up a business and then how to maintain it and keep it going, All right. So there are problems that we have to put a lot of time in considering just how we're going to tackle them. What does Nehemiah do at night 3 days after arriving in Jerusalem? Yeah, he takes a tour.
What's that word again?
Reconnoiter.
He reconnoiters. Yep. Just think about recon.
There'll be a quiz.
Yeah, and how to spell it. Hey, by the way, I spelled reconnoiter correctly the first time I wrote it. I'm like, I wonder what spell check's going to do with that.
Where'd you find the word? Was it in the dictionary?
Oh, it's a military term. Yeah, reconnaissance. Yep. So that's okay. No. So anyway, yeah, he goes out to inspect the walls because he's there to rebuild them. So he slips out at night to go and do an inspection, if you will. So he's looking at where things are still erect and solid versus where it's torn down. I imagine as he was looking at where the walls have been torn down by, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian soldiers, that he's also looking at how far did the stones go. If you've seen pictures of Jerusalem, it's built on like terraces. So they'll have a flat spot and then the ground goes up and they put a wall. And then a flat spot, the ground goes up, they put another wall. It was zones of defense, but when they tore down the wall, some of the stones went further than others. So he's probably also thinking, well, we don't have too far to move these stones back to start rebuilding and stacking. And others, he's thinking, oh, good Lord, we're going to have to really do a lot of work on this section. So he's just surveying the damage and trying to think about what his plan's going to be. All right, now, why do you suppose he went out and examined the walls after dark?
First of all, so nobody see him.
So nobody would see him. And when he says the officials, he didn't want the officials to know what he was doing. We already know the names of two of those officials, right? What were they? Sanballat and Tobiah. And they are not on his side. By the way, do we have any government officials that are not on our side? Absolutely. All right. Okay. All right. So, and the need for secrecy, of course, he needed to be secret about it because what was he trying to avoid before he could even get started?
Spooking the herd.
What's that?
Spooking the herd.
Yeah, spooking the herd. Yep, in opposition. He had people that would oppose him, and then he'd have people going, we can't do that. Right? They'd get a case of the I can'ts. All right, so he had to do this in secrecy. Now, why do, and you can think of your own family situations in particular or others, but why do we sometimes need to plan how to solve a problem without telling other people what we're about to do?
So you can study a couple of different plans and see what Mike's going to.
Okay, all right, you're coming up with options first of all, and what else?
I say they talk too much.
Okay, they talk too much. Some people do. Hey, by the way, just in answer to that, Barb, and you've heard me probably mention him a number of times now, but the great Chinese general Sun Tzu, he said that the wise general does many calculations in his mind, but he tells no one his decisions until he is ready to give the order to be executed. You don't tell anybody what you're going to do. One, because you've got spies. Two, because people might resist or undermine, anticipate. Okay?
And loose lips sink ships.
Loose lips sink ships. That's right. That was one of our World War II mottos. Loose lips sink ships. Yeah.
Also, if you know what plan you have, what is the end goal, and you are, like obviously he had the skill set to put together a plan and what materials were needed, people will follow someone who is confident and shows that they know what they're doing. Whereas if he would have got up there and go, I don't know what we're going to do,
but this is what I'm hoping.
That would
Yeah.
have been the end of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So he really needed to have a well thought out plan. Yeah. Lots of times too, I know whether it be with kids or sometimes in the work setting as a supervisor, I would consider options and make plans for how to solve problems, but sometimes I would not divulge until I was ready to give orders because the people involved were not going to like it.
Yes,
But guess who was in charge?
yes.
All right? And, they were under my authority, whether it be my children or my staff. Okay? So, didn't always tell people what was coming until I laid it on them. And I gave them a deadline, Okay, so there's lots of reasons why we don't always divulge our plans to solve a problem, but it will always involve the reactions of people. Okay? All right, let's take a look at this last paragraph now. Now, remember, we had a discussion about school boards and things like that. This is where it's going to come right down together here, okay? So verses 17 through 20, I called it the trouble, the mission, and the mandate. All right? Starting at verse 17. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. That's the trouble. Here's the mission. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. And verse 18 is the mandate. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? My pretties? That last part wasn't in there. Verse 20. I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Now, these foreigners, these officials, they were showing up, trying to create trouble and call the shots, right? So what did Nehemiah do with this city of Jerusalem? He basically went like this. This is our ground. You have no part of it. Scram. Let's take a look at our next discussion questions, our last set. Under number 4. What trouble were the people in who were living there just trying to rebuild their lives? They're trying to rebuild the temple. What kind of trouble were they in? We don't get a lot of details, but use your imagination.
They were beat down, broken down.
They were beat down, broken. They were harassed. They were misused. They were being mocked. Right? They were unprotected. Meaning, if we are unprotected, I heard a statistic. If like, you know what a psychopath is, right? A psychopathic person is someone who will do evil just because they can, and it makes no sense to us how anybody could do that or why they want to do it. Statistics are, and this is an estimate, okay, but there is one psychopath for every 100 people. And that doesn't mean they're on the rampage, but what it does mean is if they have opportunity, they will do evil because it's what they love to do. One psychopath out of every 100. So, and if psychopaths find someone who is vulnerable, it's like flipping their switch and they will do evil. Okay? So, you can be sure that there were psychopathic people in that day, just as there were here. And when they had no way of controlling who came and went in their city, and it wasn't a thriving city, they lived in rubble, you can be sure there were people who were coming to do them evil that they couldn't even understand, just because they were vulnerable. Okay? So, what trouble were the people in? A lot, but it's because they were unprotected. Okay? Now, why is that a problem? if you're unprotected.
What is it, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs? You have to have security before you can achieve other stuff. If you
Yeah.
have to worry about somebody doing evil to you or hurting you, killing you, raping, I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to get your act together when you're looking over your shoulder all the time.
It's hard to live a meaningful, fulfilled life, like Tim said, when you don't have security. All right. For instance, we're all pretty relaxed here, right? I read recently. It's a color code of. I'm gonna turn the lights on real quick. It's a color code of situations. Like they say, oh, it's green, everything's good. Red, it's dangerous. Well, I heard this color code of situations, and the first color is white. White is when you and I are totally relaxed. We have no fear of danger. We're perfectly calm. Probably when you and I get up in the morning and we go get in the shower. We don't expect trouble. So if trouble comes when we're in white mode, what's trouble probably going to be able to do to us? Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't take my weapons into the shower with me. All right? And then there's, I think the next one might have been yellow. Yellow is where we're just aware of what's going on around us. And when we're in yellow mode, there's no danger that we see, but we're watching. Which means, for instance, I am in yellow mode right now. I do have a concealed weapon on my waist. But also, you guys are all looking my way. Which way am I looking? Okay? Do you realize I've just taken note of which cars go by and how fast they're going? Nobody's pulled in here, but if somebody did whip in and jump out, I'm on yellow. I could see that. And then blue. Blue would be the code where you see a potential threat. And so you're like, you're waiting and watching. You know what I mean? And then red is when you see it's go time. We've got to intervene in something or somebody's going to get hurt. Okay? Point being, what Tim's talking about, people can't live healthy, fulfilled, relaxed lives if they're on blue all the time. Because there's people coming and going and we don't know who the dangers are, and we've got to be constantly on the alert. We can't relax. Whereas, where do we want to live our lives? At what color? Yeah, we want to live at white. See? All right? And that's not a racial term, by the way, if anybody's listening on the internet. It has nothing to do with blacks and whites. It's just a color scheme. We all want to live relaxed and free with each other. Right? So that's what's wrong with having an unprotected city, an unprotected home, or an unprotected nation. We cannot relax and just be healthy and normal. Okay? So that's the problem.
They say that's what a lot of the military men and women are like when they get back.
Yep.
They had to be on guard for so much, and then they don't know how to relax and just let it go when they get home, and it really has devastated a lot of the military people.
Yep. They're always on. Yeah, it's a stressful situation. Yeah. In fact, I think sometimes someone that's going through a post-traumatic stress syndrome kind of mental, emotional mindset, one of the worst things for them is to come home and always be on, and everything stays in white mode, and then it's like it doesn't match up. You know what I mean? In other words, sometimes one of the best things for them would be to get in a situation where there's danger and they can act because they're ready for it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's what they've trained to do for how many years? Yeah. Okay, so we know the trouble the people were in. We know why it's a problem. What was the solution for Nehemiah's people? Get busy doing what? Build the walls and put up gates so we can control who comes and goes. And then once we control who comes and goes, we can start to what? Relax. Right? We don't have to worry all the time. Now, why do you suppose, take a look at verse 18. Read what verse 18 says. Why do you suppose it was verse 18 that persuaded the people to begin rebuilding? He told them about how God had been so gracious in just paving the way for him to come with these letters of authority, and how they had the favor of the king, which the hand of God had given them. And it changed everything. I love what Tim said. These people were discouraged. They were downtrodden. They were beaten down. And Nehemiah walks in there and he says, look, we got a problem. Here's the solution. And God sent me here to do it. And he has equipped me to do it. He has provisioned me to do it. I can get stuff from the people that have been giving us a hard time, and they got to do it because King Artaxerxes gave me this letter of credit. Do you see what turned the people around? That's what you call a mandate. When we see that it's not just us, but it's something God wants us to do. That, people, changes everything. Everything. So now I want to ask you, what troubles are we in America today? What are some of the troubles we see? Lies. Okay, lies, dishonesty in media, in government leaders. We can't believe a thing. We don't know what. What other troubles?
Failing economy.
Okay, a failing economy. Because people who are in a position to manipulate things on the macro level have not only done stupid things, but they continue to do things on purpose that are counterproductive. Absolutely. Every time the state of California enacts more laws about the trucking industry to make it harder and harder, the more goods can't come into seaports and get trucked and hauled across the country. It's not just an accident. They are doing it on purpose. Okay? What else are troubles that we have in this country?
The election.
Okay, the election. This country is supposed to be a republic that's supported by democratic selection of leaders. We're supposed to vote for our representatives. We don't have elections anymore. We have selections through faulty, fake voting systems. All right. So, how many of us here are just definitely sure that in the next election, the next person is going to be elected fairly because every vote gets counted and there's no cheating? None of us believe it anymore. It's a joke.
No, we don't.
Okay? And even when we try to get to the truth with audits, you can't get to the truth because they stonewall it. They won't look at the evidence. And by the way, I'll say this for everybody on the internet listening. I went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th to protest against Congress and ask them, before you make a decision, look at the evidence. That's the only thing I wanted. And that's the only thing 700,000 other people with me wanted. That's all we wanted. So we can't trust them. What other troubles have we got? Anybody hear of something called fentanyl? Now they're packaging it to look like, I don't know, little kids' candies, chewable stuff. All right? And do you know where most fentanyl is coming? Well, first of all, do you know what nation manufactures the most fentanyl in the world? It's China. And do you know what border the most fentanyl comes across in our country? Mexican border. Why isn't it being closed up? You see, we're not being protected. And did you know you don't even have to ingest fentanyl? You just hold it in your fingers and it can kill you. That's how potent this stuff is. Why would anybody want to invent a poison that's that lethal? And why would another nation want to pump that much poison into our nation? Where is it going? People aren't just taking it to get a high. Where is it being stored? Where is it going? People, we are in trouble.
Amen.
We are.
Yes, we are.
By not protecting our border, protecting our kids, protecting the education system, protecting them from being sexually groomed to be taken advantage of by perverts. Right? So we got our troubles. All right? So let's take, just for fun, and listen, what are some of the solutions to our troubles then? What do we need to do?
Pray.
Okay, number one, we need to pray. What else are solutions to our problems?
Seek God for the answers.
Okay, seek out God for the answers. And by the way, God's given us so many of the answers right here in this book, but we're not doing them. All right? So what do we need to do for some of these things? What about the lies that we don't know what the truth is?
Speak the truth.
We need to speak truth. We need to find out what the truth is. And by the way, there are people who work hard to find out what the truth is and get it out there. They are interested in truth. One of them is Project Veritas. Did you know Project Veritas needs money to do more investigative reporting? Maybe that ought to be another one of our church missions that we do for community outreach. But who can we support that helps get out the truth so that we will know how to make right decisions? Okay? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and then like Carol's saying, like Tim said, pray for discernment so that we can know who's telling us the truth. Project Veritas does not have an agenda. They go in and they get people talking with secret cameras. They get sued right and left. But guess what? It's totally legal if you are recording your own conversation. If you're one of the players in it, all right. It's when you spy on somebody else that they don't know. That's when it's illegal. All right. What would be a solution to the fentanyl drug problem?
Close the border.
Close the borders.
Prosecute them.
Okay, yep. Prosecute the people. But we have district attorneys in big cities that they won't prosecute, right? And it's all over the bribe and political agendas. So here's my thought. Whose job is it to protect our southern border?
It's the government's job, the federal government.
Yeah, who's the government?
Us.
I have been putting out repeatedly on the internet what is to stop us from all taking a 6-week tour of duty and we all go up and line up on the border. I'm serious. What's to stop us? The government is going to tell you, well, you don't have the authority to do that. Oh, really?
We are the government.
We are the government. That's my land, right? What's that song we learned in school, our patriotic song? This land is my land, this land is your land, right? Yeah. Okay. So close up our borders. What are some other things we need to do for solutions?
We have to be willing to do God's will. If He calls you and He's laid it on your heart, and you know and you've affirmed with other brothers and sisters that this is a calling that God has on your heart, then you need to go out and do it and
Yeah.
be bold about it.
Be bold about it.
And God will take care of you through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
One of the, out of the twin tier system of justice that we have now, even when we confront lies and we can even offer convincing proofs, it's ignored by those who are in power.
Yeah, it does.
Biden was exposed today as having full knowledge and having issued the order to take Mar-a-Lago.
After,
That
It
was on Fox News this
okay.
morning.
And that's after he denied saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He stood before the country and said,
Actually, he gave the order. He said that
Oh,
Trump
sure.
had documents he needed to see, and Trump was not giving them to him, which was causing him not to be able to perform to the best of his ability.
Yeah.
I ruined that perform to the best of his ability, but basically, that's what it was.
Yeah.
He said he couldn't do what he had to do
Yeah.
because Trump wouldn't give him the documents he needed to.
And when the current occupant of the White House talks about performing to the best of his ability, that's a pretty low bar. All right. So listen, all I'm going to say is there are solutions to the troubles, right? There are. There are very real solutions that can be done. They just have to be done. All right. So we know what the troubles are. The solutions are not hard to identify. So what is our mandate for taking action? Okay, God is our first mandate. If the scriptures command us to do it, we do it.
Some things can only be broken down through fasting.
Okay?
Depends on what it is. I know when I had the jail ministry, I had to fast a lot for
Okay.
when the new girls would come in for their souls to be saved, because we were definitely fighting against the enemy in the jail.
Okay. And our mandate does come from God, and we want to draw especially close to him, so we're walking in line, right? Okay. Our mandate does not come from the government. It does not. But it's been flipped on us. We are being told we serve the government, they have the power, and that is not true. We have the ability to fire the government, except that they cheat through the elections. So there may need to be other ways to fire the government, like basically ignore them. Okay? I'm serious, just ignore. For instance, this church chose to ignore the COVID mandates, didn't we, in the end? I mean, we were concerned at first, but it didn't take us long to figure out something smells rotten here, didn't it? And it was, okay? So whose mandate did we obey? Governor Cuomo's or God's? Because God told us to not forsake what? Yeah, and to worship. And then they told people you could go back to church, but don't sing.
Yeah.
What does the Bible tell us to do before the Lord? Come before Him with praise and thanksgiving and singing. Yeah. So people, every trouble that we face has a solution, and we have a mandate. We really do. And it comes from the Lord our God Most High. So I would just encourage us all. I'm with Linda. We need to pray, fast, but if God gives us something to do, we need to go do it. And for instance, if we've got bad government leadership, what was Dale willing to do when he wasn't sure the school is being led well? He ran for office. Now, he didn't get in there in time, but circle back around next time, I think Dale's going to be on the school board. But here's the deal. He's still a presence. He doesn't have to be on the board. In fact, he might be doing a better job being off the board. He's asking the hard questions because he's already said the rest of them sit there and get a glassy, starey look when a hard question comes up. I'd like to hear them answer. We need to know what they think.
They're afraid to answer.
And why are they afraid to answer? And by the way, that's another thing that goes to our judicial system, that goes to our bad government leadership, that goes to voter fraud. Mike Lindell says the judges are afraid to get involved because they've been threatened. Well, you know what? We need some judges that are willing to lay it all on the line and do the right thing. That's all. That's all.
President Biden laid his hand on the Bible and confessed his loyalty to God to carry out and defend the Constitution. It wouldn't have taken 1 or 2 days to call him on that. No one has called him on it.
Yeah.
And yet he's still in office. So,
He wouldn't even know what that meant if he was to call him on it.
well, you could call him on it. He's supposed to defend the Constitution. It's written.
Yeah. And they are not. I'm with you, Tim.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe we need to contact people who have an ear to hear that and say, why isn't this being brought up?
Yeah.
Who's challenging the right of a president to make a decision to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on things that none of us agree to, and they don't even have the support of the elected officials behind him.
Yeah.
They didn't have a conference saying, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Well, that was
Well,
canceled
and
today.
protecting the borders of another nation and leaving ours completely undefended.
He
Yeah.
left the fencing in the desert and it's rusting to death.
Yeah.
And it's paid for. We paid for that.
That's my fencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we need to grab some equipment and go down there and put it up. That's my fence. I paid for it, doggone it. All right, so listen. Just remember, we are in trouble. There is a solution. And we simply need to know what our mandate is, what God calls us to do, and then go forth. All right? Now,
Can I back you up just 1 second? Not
Sure.
about this. You asked a question about fentanyl. It's a synthetic heroin, hundreds of times more potent than actual heroin.
Wow.
And they're putting it in everything now. It's not just in certain drugs. It's being put in all kinds of things. And how we're going to beat fentanyl is to be a people that don't need or require or even desire
drugs.
those drugs.
Yeah.
When there's no demand, the supply will dry up.
Yeah.
There's a huge demand for that stuff, and it's in our populace.
Yeah.
We need to address that. Why? Why are the people in such a need of these harmful drugs? 100,000 a year dying from it. That's the last statistic. I forget how often. It's almost so many an hour. I mean, it's
Oh,
ridiculous.
yeah.
And so we need to dry up the demand.
Yep.
And so I don't know where, well, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of brokenness, maybe the insanity of our politics and the course of our government.
Hopelessness, no future. Yeah. That's what a lot of people struggle with.
Despondent, and they think they need some kind of relief from it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
the
if we
same
can
thing.
if we can explore and understand those dynamics, yeah. Okay, so last 2 questions. As soon as the people followed Nehemiah's lead, they saw their trouble, they knew the solution, and they got their mandate. As soon as they followed Nehemiah's lead, what did the opposition do in verse 19? They showed up and started harassing. They mocked them. They also sowed seeds of doubt. Are you rebelling against the king? Wait till we go tell him. Right? In other words, they're trying to stop it in any way they can. So in the face of opposition, and you can expect opposition, in the face of opposition, where did Nehemiah go for reassurance? What did it say in the end? What did he tell him?
That God God of heaven will give us success.
God of heaven will give us success. Now scram. Beat it. All right? Okay?
I just pray they hear this, and I just pray that everybody listens to this.
I think we're going to hear another version of this on Sunday because I think the Lord's already saying this is where you got to go. Okay? All right? But listen, we do have a mandate to do what's right in the sight of the Lord our God. And that's where it starts. And when the opposition shows up and tells us, you can't do that, you don't have the authority, we're not going to answer you, keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. All right? Remember my dream. Every time I slammed my horse into the enemy, what did the enemy do? Gave ground. We just need to keep going. All right? Well, this is going to end our Bible study for tonight. And we're going to turn the tape recorder off, and we'll go to our prayer meeting section of our meeting tonight real quick. And we'll probably, yeah.
I know, at least in the churches that I've been in, for a long time, we prayed to give up no ground. No ground. So
Yeah.
we were standing on our ground firm, and we were not going to give up an inch. That means your children, your grandchildren, you don't budge, you don't back down.
Our kids are
That's
our
your
ground. Yep.
And the enemy cannot touch it.
Yep.
But then a prophecy came, oh gosh, when was it that I went down there? I think 5, 6, 7 years ago, somewhere in there, years going years. And it said now, instead of just keep passing the torch like we've always done through generations, okay, now it's your turn. Don't give up no ground. We're to go forward with them, not retire. I mean, it's okay to retire, but you know what I mean?
Yep.
Walk with them through it and gain the ground.
Yep.
Go into the promised land. Take
Much
it
has been
back.
lost. Take it.
Back everything that the locust had ate. And,
Yep.
and that's
Yeah.
what's coming now.
Yep. Well, we can be a part of that.
Yes.
So let's tell everybody goodbye who couldn't be here in person. Good night. Hope you can join us soon. We're going to change the world. Look out, world.